Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Don't you just hate it when you're all set to conquer a planet, but end up in the middle of a war between literal killing machines and an unending horde of flesh-eating horrors? Mondays, am I right, folks? I'm taking issue with Mars Attacks Zombies vs. Robots. So let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The cover's trading card homage shows an automaton engaging a group of the undead, while a Martian emerges from a portal in the background. Lock the Stargate, or else the dog will get out and rummage through the neighbor's trash again. There are also a couple of alternate covers, one featuring Raj 2000 sneaking near some of the enemy holding a bomb, with an Expendable sticker on his chest. Maybe he's been cast in a 5th Expendables movie, and that's why he's really concerned. Then one of Cerebus attacks, with what looks like a Martian version of the image character Cerebus, but with a huge chunk of his head gone, possibly due to an explosive. Day 1 of bomb disposal training begins with mixed results. Yeah, it turns out those other IDW Mars Attacks crossovers I reviewed also came with alternates, but they weren't in the scan, so I had no idea. What are you gonna do? Written and edited by Chris Rial, with art by Andy Kuhn and John Rock, or Rosh, forgive me if I mispronounced, we begin in a subterranean war room under the surface of the Red Planet, where the Science Division's chief commander, Yaz, if his last name is Queen, we'll have to wait and see, is fuming over their past campaigns to wipe out humans have been failed. Which, at its most grammatically coherent, must mean Yaz himself gave those missions an F because they didn't study enough? Unless I'm missing something, I think that's supposed to be have failed or have been failures. But hey, there's more important stuff to talk about besides typos, like an all-new threat from Earth to deal with. They combined 2 KFC double downs to create the KFC quadruple down. Addressing a gathering of other Martians, we can assume they're leaders of some kind, a scientist named Dentip explains how their insect drones from a previous mission discovered a military base housing a nuclear arsenal, but more importantly, it's also where humans have built their own Stargate. Shh! Don't let Teal'c or Jack O'Neill tell them it was actually the ancients who built it. That way the Martians will think we're cool. Yaz doesn't see this as an amazing breakthrough, more a fluke that a lesser species created tech so close to the Martian zone, and it needs to be destroyed. Dentip disagrees, saying that even though it was only used once months ago, the space bridge remains active, so they need only sink their own Stargate and have free access to some of Earth's nuclear weapons. And, presumably, the vending machine down the hall. Organics tend to implode trying to pass through the portal, necessitating protective suits, and the Martians all laugh at what appears to them to be the humans' oversized, clunky battlesuits to travel safely, believing their enemies to still be monkeys.
You see? Your stupid minds! Stupid!
Yaz orders the gates synced up, which is nearly complete sometime later. He also called for the Strikers, elite warriors who aren't big on small talk. Not when there's a planet of unsuspecting humans what need a killin'. The group's leader, Lev, tells Yaz and Dentip to await their signal to invade, as the squad walks through the portal.
I hope they're as good as they say. This can only help my career.
Letting a bunch of gun-toting, trigger-happy thugs commit murder while awaiting reward for doing nothing. I wouldn't have reviewed this if I'd known Tucker Carlson was in it. We go to the munitions complex in New Mexico, a shambles inside and out. The base has seen better days. So has the rest of the planet. Everyone's logy from all those KFC quadruple downs. Inside, a small robot is looking around for a new master, when the Strikers emerge and destroy him. And I guess we don't need to know what they're saying now that they're on Earth, because their dialogue is standard Martian, until Lev tells them to activate their translators so their victims can understand them when they get zapped. Provided they can find any victims, the base is as deserted as it is wrecked. But humans are known to hide in cities like the one in the background, so the Strikers begin their long trek. For all their awesome combat and espionage prowess, they aren't accustomed to walking great distances.
I'm so going to kill a lot of humans for this. Hey, I suggested we bring our segways, but you all whined that it'd be embarrassing and you didn't want to look ridiculous while we were invading. I gave an alternative, that's all I'm saying.
Narration cites the devastation as the toll of a war between zombies and robots as the Martians finally arrive in the city, ready for any humans that may be lurking nearby. Before they can start scaring any out by shooting at the buildings, they see humanoid silhouettes in a dust cloud up ahead, offering their first contact, and at last, first kills. But upon letting them get closer to better see the terror in their eyes, they see the decayed, shambling figures aren't all that frightened. In fact, they seem more hungry as the zombies lunge forward at the brains under glass before them. And I was never much of a Breaking Bad viewer, but this one reminds me of Walter White.
I am the one who knocks.
More like, I am the one who brains. The fight begins on what look like 2 splash pages that kind of also act as a 2-page spread, where the backgrounds have that face-off vibe, a Martian on one side, zombie on the other. An interesting choice, and I kind of like it. The undead aren't exactly difficult foes, falling pretty easily at the power of their energy guns or a kick to the head, 2 getting taken out in one shot, except the striker carrying their flag doesn't fare well against 3 of them at once, as they smash his protective helmet and then get to feasting on him, leaving the others alone. Some do draw their guns, but Lev tells them to stand down, since it's too late for the elite soldier they probably only armed with a flag.
But humans kill! These humans are already dead. Reanimated somehow, but dead.
They prefer to be called retail workers, thank you very much. Lev tells them to save their firepower for living targets, and make haste before the zombies are done with their fallen comrade. One striker that got bitten in the leg wants to wait a bit, since he can barely walk. So Lev pushes him down for the horde to feast on next, while the rest casually stroll away. They hate walking, but apparently can't run. And how strong can their armor be if it can be pierced by human teeth? Anyway, Lev figures if they could harness whatever pathogen caused this outbreak, they could use it on any remaining humans, and spare a full invasion force, just as he bumps into what they think is a squad of humans in spacesuits. They are, as the title of the book would suggest, actually robots, and the 2 sides exchange fire. Too bad for the Martians, their rays bounce off their targets' metal exteriors, some bouncing back and vaporizing at least one fellow striker, so Lev calls for a ceasefire. With little other choice, the aliens drop their weapons.
Me and the boys are out hunting zombies and that's it, but we're always up for a course correction. Joking aside, we keep procrastinating on updating our GPS. Signal's terrible out here.
Lev inquires about human rules for how prisoners are treated, and the bot clarifies he's all machine. Thinking quickly, the lead striker says they came to help the damaged humans, and can cure them. As for their guns, well, they came from a distant star. It only makes sense to be armed just in case. This bot can relate to that notion, and decides to have a chat with Lev while his crew shows the remaining aliens how they deal with damaged humans.
Usually we stay at home and post slanderous insults and libelous rumors about them on Twitter, and just imagine them melting down over how hypothetically clever we think we are.
He asks how these helpers got here, and Lev tells him about the open doorway in the Kirtland base. And don't you know, he should really call his people back home and send more aid. The bot is okay with that, so joins his new buddy, saying his mechanized boys will take good care of Lev's men. Taken care of in mafia terms, since they begin firing in them with a zombie horde approaching. One of the strikers manages to snag one robot in an energy net, but this causes the machine to fall over and crush him to death. On the plus side, he'll be voted Best Invasion Blooper of the Week back on Mars. The last alien standing blasts an opening into another bot's head, I guess looking out that it happened to be a vulnerable spot, squeezes inside, and commandeers it to take out its own comrades. Now the machines are destroyed, leaving the final elite soldier alone, surrounded by zombies. At the munitions compound, the bot is still surprised anything still works, and appreciates the clarification about the base. Then asks who invited Lev and his forces to the planet. He responds no one, really, only that they're a charitable race spreading aid to those in need.
And humans so deserve the aid we bring.
The Mars Attacks movie tanked in 1994, and he's still angry about it. They approach the portal device, where Lev clarifies they cross through in their suits because organics matter is problematic. Could be another typo, or maybe his translator has a small glitch. He offers to call his people for more help, but the bot says he's got this, because as much as he dislikes zombies, he really hates illegal aliens.
Is that racist?
Yes.
A little bit.
No.
Back on Mars, several invaders are gathered in the portal room, hoping for some good news, when Lev's head is flung through the portal, his mouth gagged with an explosive device that quickly detonates. A short time later, only 2 seem to have survived the blast. Dentip and maybe Yaz, but most of them dress the same, so who can be sure? Dentip holds up a video feed, showing the bot wielding a smoking gun in one robotic hand and Lev's headless body in the other, almost like he's mugging for the camera. And the comic ends on what could be determination to fight back by rebuilding their Stargate, as Dentip replies,
Yeah, back to the drawing board.
That's all, folks.
That was Mars Attacks, Zombies vs. Robots. And it was a fun story, the whole murderous space creeps and zombie dystopia aside. For those unaware, the original Zombies vs. Robots story, written in the early mid-aughts by this comics writer Chris Rial, sees a world where the use of portal technology eventually introduced what's basically a zombie virus, leaving only the walking corpses, the machines that oppose them, and one uninfected infant, protected by several robots so they can clone her and restart the human race. I largely skimmed the original 2 issues for some context, but I saw enough to know it's a bit darker than this. There is some humor, but not as much in terms of physical gags or unintended consequences as we see here. To this story's credit, you don't need to know the base story too well. It works fine on its own as just an alternate timeline, and the basic premise of a world where humans appear extinct is fairly apparent without much explanation. Though it does leave out how humans' own space bridge played a part in the zombie outbreak, but with so many different franchises having had different causes for such an event, or none at all, leaving it ambiguous, that it doesn't much affect these events. If the Martians had surveillance technology to notice the Stargate in the first place, you'd think at some point they would have noticed the undead shambling around. It's basically an invasion scenario that was never going to end well for the strikers. Sure, the zombies do get taken out pretty easily, but in large numbers prove formidable. Not to mention the superior Martian garb not being up to snuff, apparently. Their energy guns have no effect on the robots' metal bodies, and even when one managed to gain an advantage over one group of foes, he still has to contend with the other. It's never explicitly stated he dies, but it's ambiguous enough to go either way. He either gets overwhelmed by zombies and dies like his comrades, or continues piloting the robot, using its weapons long enough to find some kind of safety in hopes of contacting his people. Considering those survivors in the war room seemed pretty keen on revenge, it has the potential for an interesting follow-up, but maybe not one that's necessary. The only story left to tell that I can think of is another attempted invasion, maybe with a revenge angle, but this kind of started that way already, with Yaz mentioning numerous attempts that failed in one way or another. This was their 8th plan from outer space, and they can't go with Plan 9 since something already reanimated their dead. Lev was pretty clever trying to fool the robots, with lies that could have easily been convincing. How the bot knew he was lying is anyone's guess. Maybe because he's a machine and can detect vocal fluctuations or circulatory anomalies when he tells falsehoods. Or maybe he overheard him talking about invading in the panel just before they met. Either one is certainly less awkward than relying on robo-racism. There was occasional narration which was kind of fine, but maybe it wasn't always needed, like in a panel talking about how devastating a conflict can be when we can already see the results of that fight. It's not all bad, but I don't feel it added much, even to the atmosphere of the scene. Still, the comic was well-paced, some of the goofier explanations worked fine to excuse switching to translators or waiting to actually see the zombies before firing, and despite ominous environments and dire situations, it still managed to find humor. I think the art is good, with a stylized approach to character designs that work well with the inherent horror elements you'd expect from space invaders or ravenous corpses. While I wouldn't recommend this for anyone under 13 years old or so, it's not too graphic, with its aesthetic detached enough from real life then it kind of downplays some of its more violent or intense scenes. Another invasion quashed by simply being on the wrong planet at the wrong time, in the wrong timeline. A bit dark, but still fun, and pretty accessible even if you're not familiar with the Zombie vs. Robots comics. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.